This man's yard was just fine last night. He came home late from work and gazed upon his freshly mown grass. But that changed the next morning when he took his first steps outside. He saw how the perfect green pasture in front of his collapsed in on itself, revealing a huge sinkhole. It intrigued and frightened him at the same time. But what this man found inside it made his face instantly pale. It all started on a Sunday. Harold was supposed to drive his son to a soccer practice that morning. They packed their bags, and his 14-year-old kid was already decked out in full uniform. The only thing they now needed to do was drive. But it never came to that. Because the moment Harold grabbed his car keys from the hallway dresser, a loud sound was heard. And it came from his front yard. Harold opened the front door of his house and followed the sound. His son came running out after he looked around with a confused look on his face. "What is that noise, Dad?" But Harold didn't respond with words. He simply shushed his boy while focusing on the sound. Every footstep he took seemed to increase the intensity of the sound, until he finally stopped and looked in horror at what was happening beneath them. Harold, the 48-year-old contractor, stood atop his green pasture when he saw large cracks form beneath his feet. The soil in his yard was splitting, and the first pieces of grassland were already starting to sink. Harold jumped out of fright and did so just in time because a huge sinkhole had formed in front of his house within mere minutes. It was a sight to behold, but a scary one at that. Harold stood on his driveway and looked at the sinkhole in shock. His playful kid ran around the hole with more excited energy, but Harold stopped it. "Get away from there, boy. Come over here. We don't know when this hole will stop collapsing." Harold's son understood and ran toward his father, who had put himself at a safe distance. He held his son close and mumbled, "How is this possible?" After they stood still for a while, afraid to move, Harold addressed his son. "Maybe you can drive to the soccer game with a friend, son. I have to figure out what just happened here." But soccer was the last thing on Harold's 14-year-old kid's mind. He told his father that he would skip the game this week. He took a picture of the yard and sent it to his coach. "He will understand." The noise, which ended up becoming the sinkhole Harold and his boy were looking at, was so loud that it attracted more people. Harold saw that his direct neighbors and wife had also left the house. They inched closer, under Harold's strict warning, to approach carefully. "What is that thing, Harold? And how did it get there?" Harold gazed down and honestly couldn't say. But there was only one way to find out. Despite his worried wife trying to talk him out of it, Harold dropped into the large sinkhole. He wanted to know what caused this thing to mess up his yard. Everyone around the hole tried to get as close as possible without risking more concrete to cave in. There was a person down there after all, so falling rocks could cause considerable harm this time. Harold stayed down a long time. Harold had fully disappeared into the deep and dark hole, and nobody could get in contact with him, no matter how much they pleaded from the surface. "What is going on down there?" neighbors were mumbling amongst each other, all speculating about what Harold might find. But then the 48-year-old contractor's voice was heard from the deep. "This sinkhole is much bigger than it appears. It stretches far," Harold stated. Everyone around the hole looked at the pitch-black darkness below in captivating tension. They were curious to discover what was down there, just like Harold. But nobody dared to go in after him, without knowing the extent of the hole's mysteries. So, with that in mind, everyone just stared as they prayed for the brave Harold's safety. "Let's hope that he comes out with answers soon," his next-door neighbor said. "His sound that created the hole may have attracted the first few spectators, but as it goes within every closet community, a small crowd of interested people soon grows more prying eyes. So before Harold ever had the chance to reach the surface, the crowd of onlookers multiplied at least 5 times. They all gathered around the sinkhole with nervous looks on their faces, waiting for Harold to bring them news. And then it came. The moment when Harold emerged from the hole again was almost ecstatic. People wanted to clap like he had achieved some big feat. But when they saw the expression on Harold's face, all happiness seemed to fade. Harold sported a pale white face and climbed out of the sinkhole without emotion. It was like he had just seen a ghost. His first words were, "Get away from this thing, all of you!" Mild panic started to occur around the scene, people whispering to each other and walking around aimlessly. And every time one of the neighborhood people came too close to the hole or moved too heavy-footed, Harold would snap at them. "But Harold, why do we have to be this careful? What did you find down there? Please tell us so all of us can understand," an elderly lady asked the frightened man. Harold stated that he had no time to explain because what he saw down there immediately needed expert attention. "We need help!" the poor, scared man shouted. So, without diving in deeper, Harold picked up his phone from his back pocket and started dialing numbers. "Hello? Hello? Is this the fire department? Yes? Great. This is Harold Figgins speaking. I live at 1032 Blake Springs and want to report an emergency." All neighbors surrounding Harold pointed their ears and listened with bated breath. Everyone wanted to catch a glimpse of what Harold had found down there, so this phone call might give them a clue. They heard how the calls started with the fire department and ended with a call to the local government. However, there was one major problem for Harold and everyone living in his neighborhood, and it quickly became painfully clear what. Harold called multiple organizations that were meant to help them out. He explained the severe nature of the situation in his neighborhood, saying that the cracks did not stop under his garden. They ran all the way underneath the main road and probably much further. Harold's neighbors couldn't believe this news, and all of them were now just as afraid as Harold was. But that concern did not apply to all, because despite Harold constantly stating the importance of their help, he wasn't taken all that seriously. He wanted them to come by today rather now than later. But the answers he got from both emergency services and the local government were both the same. "I'm sorry, sir, but today is Sunday. We can send someone over there tomorrow to check it out if you like." Harold couldn't believe what he was hearing. He raised his voice while talking through the phone. Harold said that if they came by tomorrow, seriously bad stuff could have already happened. And proof of the scary events Harold was predicting was occurring right before everyone's eyes at that exact moment. A loud rumble was heard, and a long and deep crack formed beneath them. It started from the sinkhole's edge and made its way across the street. Yet the emergency services didn't seem to care. They were too busy enjoying their clear-skied Sunday. And while the last organization rudely hung up on Harold, he saw the crack make its way over to its next victim. The main road was already split in half, and the crack did not stop there. It made its way through the neighbor's yard until it eventually hit his recently built garage. When the crack disappeared underneath the garage, it immediately wreaked havoc. Roof tiles were coming down, and the brick wall Harold's neighbor built so proudly crumbled quite quickly. After a few minutes, the entire west wall of the structure was broken and on the pavement. And that's when panic sunk in with everybody. Neighbors started running around. They were screaming and acting aimlessly. This was getting out of hand, and Harold knew it. That's why, at that point, Harold took charge. He feared this would happen if the neighborhood heard the truth, but now that everyone knew, they had better work together. Harold climbed on a tree trunk next to the sidewalk and addressed his fellow townsfolk. "Can I have everyone's attention? This is serious, guys. This needs to be fixed, and we are not getting help from outside this community. It's all on us." Harold's speech was a desperate attempt, but somehow it worked. He got the entire neighborhood watching him, and they all listened to what he had to say. Harold even got a few volunteers who promised to help him solve this mystery. The two men walked up to Harold and introduced themselves. The first one was a 27-year-old guy named Marcus. The second was an older man named Lawrence. "Shall we dive in?" Harold suggested. The three men returned to the sinkhole to find where the cave-in originated. It was a dangerous task because a lot was still unknown, and from time to time, pieces of rock came down. But this time, down there was different. This time, something immediately came at them. It was a smell, and this smell was one Harold knew all too well. Already panicking, he asked Marcus to search between the rubble. And then Marcus found the thing that Harold had already feared down here. The smell gave it away immediately, Harold said. But what was it doing down here? Harold and the two men came above ground once more. This time, the journey downward was much shorter, so the neighborhood people were surprised to see their faces already. When they were entirely above ground, Harold was holding a red piece of paper. "What is that, Harold?" one of the onlookers asked. Harold shook his sad face as he stepped closer with the mysterious red paper. He stretched out his arm and held the thing under each of their noses. And as he expected, he saw many faces squinting out of disgust. "Man, it smells so bad," most of them said, but Marcus stated that he kind of thought it smelled like rotten bananas. "What is it?" "Ding, ding, ding. We got a winner," Harold said. He knew this particular smell very well because he often came by it during his days in construction. They were leftover fragments of nitroglycerin, a very dangerous substance, and when present in large quantities, they kind of smelled like rotten bananas. But what does that mean for our neighborhood? What does it do? And why is it here? One of the scared onlookers asked. Harold explained that you often came by that smell in construction because it was used when an old building needed to make room for a new one. It was time-consuming and expensive to take down these structures brick by brick. So, to save resources, they usually blew them up with sticks of TNT, which held a lot of this nitroglycerin. He held out the red paper. "This is what's left of a stick of dynamite." Harold's fellow neighborhood people were in shock. A stick of dynamite added at least 2 layers of tension to the already stressful situation. How could a stick of dynamite make it into the ground beneath our streets? Harold did not know, but he was determined to find out. And immediately after Harold finished his answer to that question, tension increased even more. Pressure was building underground, and suddenly the fumes increased tenfold. It was clear that the fumes emanated from the cracks below the surface. Everyone could smell them this time, and it was even audible. The concrete inside the hole was rumbling, and the nitroglycerin gas made a hissing sound when it left the cracks beneath the surface. People were getting scared and wanted to return to their homes' safety. But no home would be safe until Harold found out where the gas originated from. Harold tried calming everyone down and told them to return to their homes. But they needed to leave the house immediately if they ever heard any rumbling sound. "So stay alert," was Harold's message. And while the neighborhood waited anxiously, Harold would investigate where the gas and dynamite came from. They needed to act quickly before more serious problems arose. Harold's 2 volunteers, Marcus and Lawrence, offered to accompany him on his expedition. "Let's go!" The 3 men came together and set out on their mission. Their first action was to follow the crack in the road that led to the destroyed garage. When Harold dug between the rubble, he saw how the crack burrowed his way through the building's foundation. It was almost a perfectly straight line, and it didn't stop at the neighbor's garage. They walked further and followed the split ground from house to house. Even when the crack disappeared from view, it wasn't hard for the 3 men to realize where they needed to go. The rotten banana smell that breached the ground below made a perfect path for them to follow. Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence followed their noses, and by doing so, they quickly covered the ground. They found that the cracks popped up everywhere, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Before this day, everyone probably thought that the cracks in their walls were due to the wear and tear of old age. But with this new information, Harold and his companions knew better. Their search eventually led them all the way to the edge of town, and on their way there, they witnessed multiple pieces of evidence that this splitting earth was already infecting the town. Broken sheds and split window frames were just the start, because what they found on the edge of town shocked them to their core. A large, dense forest surrounded the town, and when buildings made way for giant pine trees, it was like Harold and his companions were in a whole other world. Yet one thing about their journey remained the same. The cracks also made their way through the foliage here. Eventually, they all came together in a surprising discovery. Between the large trees and rock formations was an opening, a cave-like entrance of sorts. The cracks all crept together and seemed to enter the hollowed-out rock formation. And when the three men followed their nose, there was no denying it. Whatever caused these sinkholes originated from inside this cave. "Does anyone know what might be in there?" Harold asked beforehand, hoping to get a heads up. And somehow, Lawrence knew. Lawrence was a bit older than the other two men, and had lived in this quiet town all his life. So, if anyone knew this place's history, it was him. The older man said this cave entrance led to an old gold mine. In the 50s, this town and its surrounding areas were known for their gold veins, long, valuable lines of gold that ran through the rock formations for miles, but those veins dried up over 50 years ago and haven't been used since, Lawrence explained. So whatever was in there now would be a mystery. The three men mustered courage and entered the cave system one by one. None of them knew what to expect, but pretty soon all three would face the surprise of their lifetime, not in a good way. The first clue about the cave's innards came after about 300 feet. As Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence walked further into the cave, they saw lights and wires along the sides. It looked like someone had been using this old mine recently. Maybe they were even still using it. They were curious and decided to follow these wires to see where they led. The deeper they went, the more it seemed like they were about to stumble upon something huge. But they had no idea. As Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence ventured deeper into the cave, the scent of nitroglycerin grew overwhelmingly strong. They could not ignore the clear signs of recent human activity. Footprints in the dust, discarded tools, and meal remnants suggested someone had been here recently. This wasn't just an abandoned mine. It had been repurposed for some unknown activity. The evidence was undeniable, but the purpose remained a mystery. But they would soon find out. What were they doing in this long-forgotten mine? With each step, the men grew more uneasy, knowing they were about to uncover a secret hidden beneath their town for years. When Harold found a complete set of unused dynamite sticks, he knew for sure. They were at the heart of the problem. Harold knew venturing deeper was the only way to save his town, but every bone in his body screamed to get out. Guided by the evidence, Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence eventually found a makeshift camp deep in the mine. It was a chaotic setup of tents and supplies, with maps and tools scattered all around. The air was tense, filled with the smell of nitroglycerin, which was making the men a bit fuzzy. Suddenly, voices echoed in the distance, interrupting their investigation. They quickly hid, realizing they weren't alone in this place. Peering cautiously over the boulder they were hiding behind, Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence witnessed an alarming scene. A group of 10 men entered the large open area. They picked up their gear and were busy at work, methodically placing dynamite sticks into the cave's rock wall. It was clear that this wasn't their first rodeo and that they knew what they were doing. But what were they hoping to find? Harold thought to himself. There was tension in the air as one of the men ignited a fuse, which quickly burned down to the dynamite. Moments later, a massive explosion rocked the cavern, sending shockwaves through the entire area. The force of the blast knocked Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence off their feet, causing them to fall backward onto the rocky ground. Dazed and disoriented, they struggled to regain their senses amidst the settling dust. Regaining their composure, Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence quickly scrambled to their feet, shaking off the disorientation from the blast. Through the clearing dust, they caught sight of the mysterious group, now triumphantly holding up pieces of shimmering debris. The glint of gold was unmistakable, even in the dim light of the cave. Harold exchanged a concerned look with his neighbors. "So, there is still gold here," he muttered softly, so the group wouldn't hear him. The fact that there was still gold in this mine surprised Harold and his companions. But that was not what kept Harold's mind racing. The entire operation they witnessed seemed highly illegal, not to mention its consequences for their town. The tremors caused by these explosions caused the cracks and sinkholes miles away from the blast, and Harold's neighbors were suffering the consequences. Harold needed to stop this, so he secretly got out his phone. Harold carefully took pictures and videos of their entire operation. He gathered as much evidence as possible to incriminate all of them. And when he was done, the trio hastily left the mine without being seen. Besides getting caught, they were also afraid of the instability of this place. It was not their intent to die down here. So when they reached the surface, all three gasped for air. "We need to warn the police!" Upon reaching the police station, Harold, Marcus, and Lawrence urgently presented the photos and videos to the authorities. The images vividly showcased the illegal mining operation and the extensive use of dynamite. Harold then explained the dire consequences their town was facing due to the reckless actions in the mine. The urgency in his voice and the compelling evidence in their hands left no room for doubt about the seriousness of the situation. Harold kept pressing the critical nature of the situation. "This isn't just an ordinary sinkhole. It's a direct result of this illegal mining operation," he asserted firmly. He emphasized how the actions of these criminals posed a significant threat to the entire town. Harold's case was compelling. This time, he would not be ignored. The police believed every word and understood the need to act now. "We will help you. Tell us where to go." With a sense of urgency, the police quickly organized a team to infiltrate the mine, enlisting Harold and his neighbors as guides due to their first-hand knowledge of the area. Harold took the lead as they prepared to enter the cave system. With flashlights in hand and an arrest team at the ready, he guided the team through the mine's opening. It didn't take them long to reach the chain of lights again. Harold, who walked at the front of the pack, signaled the squad to move as quietly as possible from this point onward. The last thing they wanted to do was to warn these criminals of their presence. The police officers listened closely to Harold's instruction and only used the tips of their toes to inch forward. In the distance, voices were heard, indicating that the criminals were still present in the mine. The leading officer to whom Harold and his companions showed the evidence was also part of the team. So once Harold placed the entire squad close enough to the perpetrators to catch them in the act, the leading officer gave the signal to strike. When he did, a group of 20 officers appeared from multiple directions and overwhelmed the illegal miners within minutes. It was a calculated and effortless arrest. When the miners were arrested and taken back to the police station, they were questioned by the lead officer. And that's when the extent of their operation became clear. This wasn't just a local crime scene. The illegal mining operation was a nationwide scheme. And even within the first few days of questioning, the police uncovered at least 20 digging operations. And all of the areas had sinkholes and collapsed buildings as a result. After the 10 men were sentenced, with a long jail time as a result, the police turned toward Howard and his neighbors. And that's when the worried civilian received something he did not expect. The police recognized their initial negligence. They said that they and other authorities needed to be ashamed of their actions. Ignoring a distress call was always bad, but these criminals would never have been brought to justice without Harold. After the apology, the police officer presented Howard and his neighborhood watch with another pleasant surprise. When a second team entered the mine after the arrest, they uncovered almost all of the delved gold by the criminal operation, which was substantial. The bounty was worth millions of dollars, and the local government promised that this cash flow was going to be put to good use, and Harold was ecstatic when he heard the money's destination. The proceeds from the gold bounty were dedicated to an extensive project that Harold had to lead. With his extensive background in construction, he was the perfect candidate to oversee the ambitious plan to refurbish the city's stability. It was a massive undertaking, but one that would ensure the residents could live safely once again. They reinforced the ground beneath the town, repaired damaged houses, and permanently closed the mine to prevent further danger. Under Harold's experienced guidance, teams of engineers and construction workers began stabilizing the ground. They used advanced techniques and materials to fill the sinkholes and reinforce the earth, ensuring the town's foundation was solid and secure once more. Simultaneously, Harold coordinated with local contractors to repair the homes that the sinkholes had damaged. His expertise was invaluable, and he worked tirelessly to ensure every repair met the highest safety and quality standards. Months passed, and the town slowly transformed. The once dangerous sinkholes were now solid ground, and the homes that had been on the brink of collapse stood firm and proud once more. The community watched in awe as their town was revitalized, and they owed it all to Harold's leadership and determination. Finally, the day came when the project was completed. The mine was officially closed, and the town was declared safe. The neighborhood organized a grand party to celebrate this momentous achievement and honor the man who made it all possible. The streets were filled with music, laughter, and an air of celebration. As the evening approached, the community gathered around a small stage in the town square. Harold stepped up, and the crowd cheered. Overwhelmed with emotion, Harold looked out at the sea of smiling faces, his heart full of gratitude. He began his speech. Today, we stand together not just as neighbors, but as a united community. Our town faced a crisis, but we did not let fear overcome us. Instead, we came together and achieved something extraordinary. I am honored to have been a part of this journey. But this achievement isn't mine alone. It belongs to all of you. Your support and trust were the foundations upon which we rebuilt our town. Harold concluded his speech with a simple yet powerful statement. I am proud to call this town my home, and all of you, my family. At that point, Harold felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that his actions had not only saved his town, but had also brought his community closer together. As he looked around at the happy faces, he knew that this was a moment he would cherish forever. Do you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation,